Hello and welcome to the VKViewer demonstration video. Before we get into the VKViewer software, I'm just going to quickly talk about the data that is being used inside of the VKViewer program. All GE Dresser channel partners, that is Mason Elin Mark Centers and Consolidated GTC Centers, as well as Dresser Direct offices, use a software program called ValveKeep. It's that ValveKeep program into which they enter all of your valves data. So whether it's a sale or a repair or a test or any kind of event that's occurring to your valves, the information about that event is being input into ValveKeep at your local repair facility. ValveKeep is purpose-built for valves and valve maintenance, as well as all analytical tasks associated with them. The ValveKeep software is very powerful and has been in use at most of the channel partners since the mid-90s. VKViewer, which is what we're looking at today, it is the program that allows you, the owner of the valve, to access the data that the local GE, Dresser, Consolidated, or Mason Elin channel partner is keeping on your valves. VKViewer is currently on version 6. The original VKViewer was introduced in around 2002, and it used the internet technologies available of the day. Development of VKViewer 6 began in 2008. When we redesigned VKViewer, we took a look at all of the knowledge we had gained from our users and from ourselves in the VKViewer 5 program, as well as ValveKeep. So VKViewer 6 is really an embodiment of over 15 years of knowledge of our users and of us as a manufacturer, and we're delivering it to you in a web-enabled package that is second to none. The one important thing to remember about ValveKeep and VKViewer is the level of detail of the data inside of them. In the ValveKeep program, the repair center is keeping an unprecedented amount of data. Images, critical data, as shipped, as received, everything you can imagine about your valves are being tracked inside of ValveKeep. That's accessible to you with VKViewer. If you're running an ERP program at your facility, you cannot print a test certificate from it. There simply is not enough data inside of ERP programs to print an accurate test report. A program like VKViewer, used in conjunction with your GTC or Mark, allows you the level of detail you need for compliance, that you need for audits, and that you need for your own peace of mind and insurance requirements at your facility. Logging into VKViewer is a breeze. You'll either access a link on your Green Tag Center or Mark or Dresser Direct website to get to VKViewer, or you might be given a URL to access it directly. We suggest running VKViewer inside of Chrome or Firefox. Internet Explorer version 8 or newer will run just as well, but it will be a little bit slower inside of IE than Chrome. There are two ways to log into VKViewer. The most common way is by using a user ID and a password. These would be given to you by the GTC, Mark, or Dresser Direct office. These are secure logins that only you will know and allow you access to your data alone. The other way to log into VKViewer is through a quick access code. The idea behind the quick access code is that if there was one specific valve that was in question, and you were working with somebody at the channel partner and you needed to further investigate that single valve, they can give you a quick access code giving you immediate access to only that valve. It's a nice simple way to cut through all of the searching and analysis functions available in VKViewer and just simply take a look at the one valve in question. Back on the Login tab, I'm going to go ahead and put in my user ID and my password, and then I will log into the software. Once you log into VKViewer, you'll be on the Valve Tree tab. You can consider the valve tree to be your home base, as a large amount of the functions that you want to perform are easily available from this one location. Let's take a closer look at this valve tree tab. This center area is where all of your data will be displayed. It's important to understand the hierarchy of the data inside of VKViewer. In VKViewer terms, there are owners, which are the people that own the valves, so that would be your company. All owners are made up of plants, which are physical locations of the company, so these are all the physical locations, and each physical location will have a number of valves inside of it. That is the hierarchy of the data inside of VKViewer. owners, plants, and then valves. To take a look at your valves by unit or by service or criticality or inlet size or manufacturer or any other way, you can do that. It's just not an inherent part of the hierarchy of the data. That's done purposely. The reason is we have no idea of how you're going to want to take a look at your valves and group your valves. So we break it down by owner, by plant, and by valve. Each valve is made up of a series of events. So here inside of the valve tree, you'll see we have PSV Demo 1. If I open up PSV Demo 1, you'll notice that there are 4 events to it. There was an event in 04, 05, 07, and finally in 2010. Those 4 events make up the life of the valve that we have inside of VKViewer. Those 4 events, 3 of them are historical. 04, 05, and 07 are past events to the valve. The event that occurred in 2010 was the last event, and that's how your valve is today in your facility. In VKViewer terms, that's called the most recent, or the MR. So inside of VKViewer, every valve is made up of events, and the events are either historical or most recent. There's only one most recent, and that is the way that the valve is today inside of your facility. Let's continue our look at the valve tree command. Across the top of the valve tree form are some buttons that allow you to access common functions that you would use. You can go into the owner and plants command, which allows you to select the valves that you're working with. You can be on the valve tree, which we are now. The repair list is a spreadsheet look at all of your valves and the events to them. The locations, loops, turnaround cloud, and notes commands we will cover further in the demo. Up in the top right hand corner of VKViewer is a help system, access to your user preferences, as well as the ability to log out of VKViewer. Up here in the right hand corner is the current working owner and plant. This concept is very important inside of VKViewer. As we talked about earlier, VKViewer has its valve set up in a way that is owner, plant, and valve based. If you follow that logic, it makes sense that we're always working with something. So we're always in a working owner and plant. So it's always important to know what valves you're working with, and the valves you're working with are shown here in the working owner and plant. Right now I'm working in the owner of training and all the plants for it. So I can see all of the valves that are inside of the owner by the name of training. Continuing our exploration of the valve tree tab, you see that we have buttons allowing us access to other common functions inside of VKViewer. The global find you'll use all the time, and it allows you to find a valve in any of the plants that you have access to. The analysis button brings up all of the common analytical functions built into VKViewer. The valve calendar brings up a very visual planning tool that will show you valves in a calendar format that are either past due or coming due for repair or have been repaired. The view allows you some common views that you might want to see your valves in. Email is available on all of the VKViewer forms, and it quickly brings up an email that you can send to somebody at the repair center to help you with a question you have. And reports, being a key item inside of VKViewer, are accessible from the report button. Over on the left-hand side, we have the ability to manipulate the valve tree in which all of our valves are displayed, and those commands are here in the valve tree functions. As well, here in the lower left, we have access to the to-do list. ValveKeep and VKViewer have a to-do list that is interactive between both the customer and the repair facility. We'll get into the to-do functions later on during our demo. Let's take a closer look at our valve tree, or our instrument index itself. As we talked about earlier, we have an owner, a plant, and all of the valves. Here's the list of all of our valves. Obviously, these data points displayed are selectable by you. Over here on the right-hand side is a nice little lifeline showing you all of the repairs that are done to the valve. So when you're looking at a valve in this long list, you can quickly see how many times it's been repaired and when the last time it was repaired. The icons that we see are indicative of what's going on with the valve as well. The alarm clock ringing means that that valve is past due. If it is set up as an icon, which is very common in a PNID or a CAD program, here we see the relief valve, those icons mean that that valve is not past due. If I scroll down through my tree for a little ways, you'll see that inside of the tree are all of our valve assets in our facility, whether it's a control valve, whether it's a line or manual valve, or whether it's electric actuator. All of our valve assets are inside of our tree. Every valve is set up in the same way as we talked about earlier with PSV Demo 1. Here you see a control valve, and you see that it has 3 events, one in 2008, one in 2010, and the most recent was in 2012. Taking a closer look at the valve inside the tree is pretty revealing. Again, with the CV Demo 1, we know that there was 3 events to it. If we open up any event for the valve itself, you'll see this event here, for example, in 2012. It has a list of the generic attachments, the images, and the parts that were associated with that repair. So if you wanted to take a look at a PDF or an XLS or a Word file or anything on that level that was attached to any given repair, you can see them listed here in the folders underneath the repair itself. Underneath the valve itself are also folders holding images or attachments that would be attached to the valve over the life of the valve. So the data points that are being shown in the tree, they are obviously selectable by you. Over here in the valve tree functions, we have a few commands that allow us to manipulate the data displayed inside the tree. There are a couple really common ones that we'll look at, and we'll leave the rest for your own exploration. The tree columns command allows you to set up the display fields at the valve level and at the event level inside of the tree. Up here we have 2 checkboxes which allow you to manipulate the tree in very common ways. When we take a look at our tree, and I'll just close up all of the valves in it and scroll back up to the first valve in the tree. When we take a look at our tree, you'll notice that it goes owner, plant, and then valves. A very common way you might want to look at your data includes the unit. If I check the unit level box, VKViewer will rebuild my tree, and it will show me my owner and my plant and all of the associated units. All of the units have a count beside them. So inside of my training Livingston plant, inside of the DOT unit, I have these 5 relief valves. Just like the unit level checkbox, I can set up the tree to show me an equipment level. Again, I checked the checkbox, my tree was rebuilt, and now when I open up my tree, you'll see that my unit is broken into the 4 basic equipment types that VKViewer keeps track of. VKViewer has control valves, relief devices, which includes relief valves, tank vents, rupture discs, flame arresters, all different kinds of relief devices, line or manual valves, as well as motor operated valves or electric actuators. Those are the 4 basic equipment types that we keep track of inside of the VKViewer software. So that's a really quick introduction to the valve tree, and it gives you an idea of some of the power that we have inside of the tree. I'm now going to shut off the unit level, as well as the equipment type level, returning our tree back to just the owner, plant, and valves, and we're going to take a look at some of the other functions that we would very commonly do from the valve tree command. Typically, you would log into VKViewer for a couple of different reasons. One of the most common is to find a specific valve and investigate a repair to it, or investigate the valve because there's some kind of malfunction with the valve in your facility. There's 2 ways to find valves really easily inside of VKViewer. One way is using the global find command. When I go into the global find command, I can select the kind of equipment I want to take a look in, relief devices, control valves, line valves, or electric actuators, and I select the field that I want to search by. All of the fields that are kept about every event to every valve inside the system are available. In that list you saw that there's many hundred. Once I pick the field, I can input the search details and I can go ahead and find the valve. That's one way to find a valve quickly. The other way, and perhaps the more visually pleasing way, is to use the tree. Using the tree is as simple as opening up the owner and the plant and searching through the list of valves until you find the valve in question. Let's assume that it was PSV Demo 1 that we had repaired and we wanted to take a look at the results of the repair. Finding the valve inside the tree and opening it shows me all of the different events that have occurred to the valve, and I would know that the most recent event to the valve would be the one that was just done. So I can go ahead and I can click the plus beside the event to open up all of the associated information about it. We can, for example, take a look at any attachments that were made and attached to the repair. We could take a look at images, so that would be parts replaced, as received images, as shipped images, and we can take a look at the parts that were associated with the repair as well. Taking a look at the attachments is as easy as double-clicking on it. So let's say that we wanted to take a look at the hydrostatic report that was attached to the repair. All we need to do is double-click on it, and a tab opens up inside of VKViewer, bringing us to the generic attachment of the hydro test. Taking a look at the documented details of it, we can see them all here inside of the generic attachment details form. I've just closed off the generic attachments, and we can do something very similar with the images as well. If we want to take a look at the images taken of the repair to that valve, all I need to do is inside the images folder, double click an image, and it will bring up the images command showing me all the images. Across the bottom of the images command, I have thumbnails that I can use to take a quick look at any picture that I want. The other thing that we can do inside the image command is I can go and take a look at the image compare. This allows me to look at images from previous events to this valve and compare them. Here on the left, I've got my most recent event, and here on the right, I can take a look at any other event or at images that are attached to the valve itself. So if I wanted to see images of the repair from 2007, it's as easy as clicking on the 2007 event, and I can take a look at images that were added in that repair. I'll close that image compare command, brings me back to my images. Closing that brings me back to my tree. And the last thing that we have set up separately inside the tree is the part information, and that's pretty straight ahead. You can take a look at all of the parts that were touched or replaced or anything like that during the repair. Looking at the repair is one thing, but getting a printed test report of the repair is another. So that is one of the most common things that you're going to want to do, is generate a report. So once we find the valve inside of the tree that we're interested in, and we've found the event that we're interested in or the repair that we're interested in, I can come up, I can click the report button, I can select data sheet, and VKViewer will use the customized report that the Green Tag Center Mark or Dresser Repair Facility has, and it will print that, turn it into a PDF, and download it to my local computer. At that point, I can come down, I can take a look at it, open it up, and the PDF will be open, and we can now see it inside of our PDF viewer. That's given us a nice overview of all of the associated data with the repair and the report that can be generated from the repair. But what about the event data itself? In VKViewer terminology, the event data for every valve is stored in something called the details forms. So all these 4 events have associated with them details forms, giving you access to all of the repair data kept by the facility. So let's go ahead and let's double click on one of these events, and that will open up a window that will give us the details form for the valve and the repair to the valve that we were questioning. Across the top, you'll see we have the tag number, the model number. We have some very common information that you're going to want to use to reference your valve. We also see our working owner and plant, and in this case we're in the owner of training and the plant of Livingston. Here we see the tabs reflecting all of the different data items or data categories that we keep track of inside the details form. The order info tab gives us the general information about the repair or the test event. The general tab is where we record the as received and as shipped information that is general to the valve and typically doesn't change from repair to repair, whether it's the manufacturer, the model number, the job number, the serial number, things of this nature. The configuration tab has as received and as shipped data in it as well. The configuration tab has all of the information about the valve and the way that it is configured, including materials and sizes and things of this nature. I'm in Relief Devices right now, and it has a nameplates and a process data tab that shows you the manufacturer nameplate, the previous repair nameplate, the current repair nameplate, which is the actual process conditions of the valve today. we have a work performed and an as received tab. And here for relief devices, we have a very critical amount of information. We have information about a pretest and information about the pretest pressures that it popped at. When a valve is set and when a valve is pretested, we often want to know the ratio of those two against each other, because that tells us how the valve would have performed in the field. So in this case here, we see that it was pretested at 738 psi. It was cold set at 735, so the pretest was at 100.4% of the cold diff. This is a very critical piece of information for relief devices, and VKViewer allows you to do all kinds of analytical functions on that pretest percent of cold diff, and that allows you to keep track of your valves in a very detailed way. Working further through the tabs, we have the parts information and the critical dimensions information. The next tab is our final tests. This tab allows you to take a look at all of the final test parameters of the valve. At the bottom of all forms, we have the ability to keep track of comments about any valve or any repair to any valve. Next tab over is the quality control checklist and cost tab. Here all of the QC information is recorded as the repair facility has it in their QC manual. And then finally, for relief valves, we have the ability to take a look at the side-by-side tab, which shows us the as received and as shipped data in a summary format. So that's the details form for a relief valve. I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to close that. And that brings us back to our tree. If we now scroll down in our tree, we'll see the other kinds of valves that we have inside of our plant. Let's select the control valve and let's take a look at the details form for it. I've now opened up CV Demo 1. I see the 3 events for it, and let's go ahead and let's take a look at the details form for this control valve CV Demo 1. Double clicking on the event brings me to the details form, and it opens up in my web browser. Again, across the top we have some static information about the valve that we may want to see regardless of what tab we're on, and inside the details form we have all of the different tabs. Again, these tabs follow the general workflow process of the valve when it is in the repair shop. So we have our order info information. This contains all of the details about the order, purchase order numbers, purchase order dates, that kind of information. We have a general tab. Again, we keep track of the as received and the as shipped information about the valve. The as received tab shows us the information about the valve as it was received. On the As Received tab, we have the ability to document the previous repair. We also have the ability to do a calibration or a functional test of the control valve as it was received. The Valve Config tab keeps track of all the information about the valve's configuration, materials, the valve type, the pressure rating, the valve CV, details of that nature. And again, we keep track of the As Received and the As Shipped aspects of that data. Actuator and Positioner tab, pretty self-explanatory. We have the information about the actuator, positioner, and transducer. Measured dimensions allow us to keep track of the critical dimensions of the control valve. The Parts Test tab allows us to detail the pressure test that was done on the seat and the back seat and the hydro test and things of that nature. Again, down at the bottom of most of the tabs in the details forms, we see the comment fields. So we have description, as received details, and a general comment that is following the valve through its repair. On the test tab, we have the test information. Test information also includes a calibration or a functional test, so it's fully documented on the control valve. The quality control and cost tab allows those information to be tracked. And finally, the side-by-side tab allows you a quick overview of the different summaries from the different tabs. So general, valve configuration, and positioner and transducer. So that collectively makes up the information about a single event that was performed to a control valve. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of the control valve details form, and that brings us back to our valve tree. Let's take a look at a couple of the other common functions you would likely do from the valve tree tab. First one we'll look at is in the analysis command. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top of my tree, and I'm going to select the owner alone so I can do the analysis on the entire owner. I'll click on analysis and I'll go into the general analysis command. What I'm interested in doing here is I'm interested in finding out the manufacturer breakdown of the entire set of valves that we have inside of our owner. You notice that I'm on the relief valves. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to find the manufacturer field, if I can. I've added it to my list of fields to be analyzed, and I'll go ahead and I'll click Analyze. And the results page then becomes available. You'll notice that we have our manufacturer field that was the one that we did the analysis on. I can take a look at it in a grid result or look at it in a chart result. And in the chart result, I end up showing by default the top 20 manufacturers of what it was that I was interested in, which in this case was the owner or customer. So here's a nice easy way to get the manufacturer breakdown, or actually the analysis on any data fields you have inside of the system, whether it's service, whether it's criticality, whether it's inlet size, whether it's valve CV, whether it is if it's a smart positioner or not. Any data field at all that you want, you can do a general analysis on. Of course, all of this information can be printed, it can be exported to Excel, and it can be put into any kind of report or document that you require. I'm going to now close back out of the general analysis, and I will be back on the valve tree form. The valve calendar is another very useful and unique to VKViewer command. If I come over and click on the valve calendar button, I'm presented with a menu allowing me to see the calendar using coming due, past due valves, or a calendar of the repairs performed. If I go into the coming due, past due command, Valve Keep draws me a calendar, and the calendar contains all of the valves that are either coming due or past due. So here, for example, on September 7, you see we had 2 relief devices due. On September 20, we have 2 relief devices also due. If I go forward a month to October, on the 12th of October, I have 7 relief valves coming due. If I click on that date, I will end up being shown the grid of all of the valves that are coming due. At this point, with the grid of the valves coming due, I can go on and further investigate them or print a report of them or do anything that I want. If I close out that list, I'm back in my calendar. Going backwards in time, I can see the valves that should have been repaired. For example, in July of 2012, on the 24th, there were 8 relief valves that were due for maintenance. Clicking on the 24th shows me the 8 valves. Inside of this calendar, I can add control valves, line valves, and the electric actuator motor operated valves to the calendar so I can see all of my equipment at any one time. The calendar is a really unique way to take a look at the results, but we can also do it in another way. For example, if I take a look at by month, I see the monthly summary of all of the valves that were either past due or coming due. So as I scroll through the list of months, what we'll see, for example, here is 20 months ago, there were 10 relief valves due, and that was the month of the 1st of 2011. So January of 2011, there were 10 valves due. So if we wanted to see all of the valves that should have been repaired in 2011, I can just scroll through the lists, selecting all of the months for 2011, and once I have them all selected, I can come up and I can view the valves, or the events for the valves that should have been repaired. There's the 107 valves that should have been repaired in 2011. Closing that form shows me back to the by month command. So that's a really interesting way to take a look at it. We can also view the parts that need to be replaced based upon the last repair. So as we're doing the planning for coming up repairs or for past due repairs, we can take a look at the parts that should be ordered for those upcoming repairs. A very handy feature inside of VKViewer. The final way we'll take a look at looking at the results is in the chart command. If I click on by chart, right now it's set up to show me by year, and by year we've got 2006 through 2016, and these are all of the relief valves, all 632, and the distribution of them through the years past due and coming due for repair. Again, this was done just for relief valves. If I want, I can do the same analysis on control valves, line valves, and electric actuators, or all of those pieces of equipment at any time. I'm going to click back now to go back to my valve tree page. I can go back to my valve calendar and take a look at the other option. The first choice that we chose from the menu was coming due, past due calendar. That allowed us to look at all of the valves that needed to be repaired or were coming due for repair. The other option we have is to take a look at the repairs performed. The calendar is identical, just the data that we're looking at is slightly different. With the repairs performed, you can look back in time and see how busy you were with your repairs for your facility. It's a great tool and it's uniquely available in VKViewer. We'll look at one last thing on the valve tree page before we move on. Down here in the lower left, we've seen it, but we really haven't talked much about it, is the to-do list. The to-do list is a function that's available in ValveKeepin and VKViewer, and it allows to-do items to be attached to a valve that's being repaired, attached to a plant, or attached to an owner. So let's suppose that a valve had a part that needed to be replaced. The repair facility could document the part that needed to be replaced by taking pictures of it, recording the information about how the part was received, and then making a to-do list item that is being brought to your attention when you log into VKViewer. So the to-do list allows the facility to interact with you, and it allows you to interact with the facility. If I take a look at some of the options on the to-do list area, I notice that I have a 4 and a drop down. If I drop down the 4 and I tell it to show me only the items that are for what I'm on in the tree, being this tree over here, you'll notice that there's 7 to-do items for training. If I click on the plant of Livingston, you'll notice that we have now dropped down to 4 to-do items. So that means 3 to-do items were in some other plant for the owner of training. Dropping down to a single valve, in this case PSV Demo 1, you'll notice that my to-do items have decreased to just 1 item. So this tells you that there are to-do items for this specific valve. There's a number of other ways that we can filter and sort this grid to give you more specific views, but we'll cover that in further demos. The one thing we will look at is the to-do list itself. If I click the list button, the browser opens up the to-do command. The to-do command starts with a grid list of all of the to-dos that I have available to me. I can sort and search these in any way that I want, and I can interact with them, giving approval, showing them as handled, or doing anything else that I want with them. Clicking on the detail information inside of the grid, it opens up the to-dos actual items, and I can see what is going on with the valve, and I can handle it as required. I will close out of the view of them, and I will close out of the to-do list, and that brings me back to the valve tree. The valve tree is only one aspect of how we can interact with the valve data inside of VKViewer. The other option we have is to work in a spreadsheet of the valves, or as we call it, the repair list. Let's suppose that I logged into VKViewer, and once logged into VKViewer, I went through and I found the plant that I was interested in working on valves in. If I double click on that plant, VKViewer will switch me over to the repair list tab, and it will also put me inside of that owner's plant. Up here you notice now I'm working in training Livingston, which was what I had double clicked on inside of the tree. I'm on the repair list function now, showing me the spreadsheet of all of the valves that I have inside of this owner and this plant. Down here you notice that there's 155 events shown in my grid. The columns of the grid are all definable by me. When we were inside the details forms, you saw tab after tab of valve information being recorded. Every single one of those fields has the ability to be added to this grid. In the top left of the repair list are a couple of really important drop downs. The first one is shown here, and when you drop it down, you have the ability to select between the most recent, all repairs, or show all of the events only for that one valve that we are on. So right now in most recents, what we're looking at in the grid is the 155 valves as they sit in the field. If I drop it down and I click on all repairs, what we're looking at is all of the repair events that have ever been performed on all of the valves inside of training Livingston. It turns out there was 432 repairs. The next two drop downs allow me to quickly select between the owners and the plants. If I drop down my list of plants, you see all of the plants listed, and I can very quickly change between the plant that I'm on and another plant I might be interested in. So those are the main drop downs that allow us to have big effect on the grid. Across the top of the grid we have a number of other buttons. These allow us to do things to the data that we're looking at inside the grid as well. Right now we're showing relief valves. If I click on the control valve icon, we are now looking at the 17 control valves that are in the system. I can change it to line or manual valves. and I can also change it to electric actuators or manual operators for valves. So those are the four main equipment types that are inside of VKViewer. I'm switching back to relief valves to further go through the list. The Lifeline tab we'll take a look at in a moment, but if we wanted to know what parts were associated with the event that we're on currently in the grid, we would click on the part list. A new tab opens up in our browser, and we see the 7 parts that were associated with that one repair. Again, in our grid, we have the ability to look at the details of any given parts. So I'll click on the details button, and now you see all of the information about it. The part name, the condition that received, the work that was performed on it. All of this stuff that occurred to the part inside of that repair is documented here. I close that up, and again we see the 7 that are available, and I can close out of the parts grid. Moving further down that list, we see the images. Opening up the images shows me all of the images that were taken during that repair. Across the bottom are a thumbnail of all of the available images. And like we talked about earlier, we have the ability to do image compare if you wanted to look at images from this repair versus a previous repair. I closed out of that. The next button over shows us the generic attachments. And what generic attachments are is they are documents that have been added to the repair. So in the details form, we keep track of all the valve data. In the parts form, we keep track of all the parts touched or replaced during the repair. In the images form, we keep track of all of the pictures that were taken to document the repair. The generic attachments are PDFs or XLSs or DWGs of anything that was additional to the repair data. So for example, if we did an EVT test, if we had some sort of external report like a hydro test report, perhaps a material handling sheet, perhaps a sizing selection sheet, any kind of document that needs to be added can be. So this is a repository that allows you to manage change to your valves. Once a file has been added to the repair, you can take a look at it inside of VKViewer. So here we notice that there's a sizing and selection sheet attached. If I come down and click on the open view, VKViewer goes into the database of ValveKeep. It will get that file, it will download it to your local computer. You see it down here in the bottom of the browser. If I open it, it will get the file and it will send it to Windows. Windows on your local computer will open it, and now you'll see the sizing document that is associated with that valve. Clicking close closes me out of that tab, and we can take a look at the few other options that we have. Here we see that we have actions and remarks. We have the ability to track welds. If it was a control valve, we can track positioner information. And finally, we have the option to go into the to-do command again. So those are the main information about the valves. We have the ability to change the equipment. We have the parts, images, generic attachments, and the to-dos. On the left-hand side of the repair list form, we have the ability to interact with the data as well. We can limit the grid to any kind of thing we want. So if you only wanted to see the events that had an image, for example, we can come in the limit grid. We can say, show me the events with images, click apply, and now we end up seeing all of the events that have images on them. I'll come back and I will cancel that. And now we're back to just the main data. Email is an interesting command inside of VKViewer. Every form has the ability to have an email generated by VKViewer containing whatever context-sensitive information is on the form. So let's say that we were taking a look at a valve in our grid and we had a question that we wanted to follow up with the GTC or the mark or the dresser direct operation. I'm on the valve or on the repair in question. I click on the email button. I tell it I want to email the question. And VKViewer goes and that does have a process of finding the email address of who the email is being sent to, and that email that gets sent has popped up. You see it here. It is going to the default address inside of the system. It can go to a customer service rep or anything like that at the facility, and it details what it is that we were looking at on the screen so that we don't have to copy it or paste it or somehow or other put it into the email. Going further down this list of buttons, we have the ability to find. It's pretty straightforward. We can set the columns that are being shown in the grid. So again, all of the details, forms, fields are available. If I come into the columns command, You see on the left hand side all of the 300, 400, or 500 fields depending upon which equipment type we're in, and we can add that to our grid so we can see anything we want. We have the ability to save and to share these columns. We can access the valve calendar, we can access the analysis commands. VKViewer has some very involved filtering for you. You can take a look at any of the valves that you want, whether it is a simple thing as all the valves in Unit 11, or whether it's something more complicated like all the valves with a smart positioner made by Fisher, whether it's all valves that have a smart positioner when they were shipped but they didn't have a smart positioner when they were received. Any kind of filter at all that you can imagine can be created. In the grid, we also have the ability to take a look at a details form. Once we select the valve event that we're interested in, we can click on the details button and the details form will open up. This time I'm not going to close that details form, I'm just going to click back on the repair list tab and we're going to continue working with that one valve open. In this way we can open up more than one valve. Let's suppose I wanted to see a control valve, I'll change to control valves, move to the control valve in question, click on the details form, and now I've got the control valves detailed open as well. So as you can see, we can investigate many valves at one time, finding out everything that we're interested in. I'm switching back to relief valves. Alright, let's take another look at some more of the functionality that we can do here. Where the column headers are, grabbing a column header and dragging it is a very simple way to make the columns wider, make them smaller. Inside of the automatic filtering, I can take a look at a specific item. So in the serial number, for example, I might want to see all of the serial numbers that have 91 in them. Putting 91 into the column head filter shows me the 18 different items that have 91 inside of the serial number. This automatic filtering is available in almost all of the grids. I'll remove the filter to get back to all of the information I wanted. We can also click by column header, and that allows me to take a look at all of the different items that have been input before so that I can very easily apply a filter finding something of interest. So the grid has a lot of interesting power in it, no question. Over here in the top left you see there's a button and a funny looking icon. If I click on the button, I get a menu. The menu allows me to have quick access to commands that are very common. I can find, for example, I can set the columns, I can take a look at a filter, I can configure pressure analysis columns, I can configure date calculated columns, I can set the sort, I can show or hide the group bar, and we can export. Exporting is a very handy function to allow you to use data in your ERP program or to allow you to create any kind of report you would want using the data inside of VKViewer. So let's go back to the columns command and let's add a couple more columns to our grid. So I've come into my columns command, I'm going to scroll down to the M's and I'm going to add manufacturer. I'm going to add maintenance for. Scrolling a little bit further down, I'm going to add unit. So I get down to the U's, and I'm also going to add service. Down to the S's, find service, click on it and click add, and I'm going to click apply, adding all of those columns to my grid. And there they are. Why did I add those columns? Because I wanted to show one more command inside of the grid that is incredibly powerful and really easy to use, and it's called the group bar. That's what this icon here is. So right beside the icon that is for the menu is the icon for the group bar. So let's go ahead and I'm going to click on the group bar icon, and that gives me an extra row inside of my grid. And what that row allows me to do is it allows me to drag up any column that I want, and it will then group my information by it. So if I, for example, drag up manufacturer, you'll see that it's now grouped by manufacturer. And if I drag up my unit, you'll see that it is now grouped by manufacturer. And if I open up a manufacturer, in this case consolidated, you'll see all of the units that my consolidated valves are in. So in this case, I'm grouped by manufacturer and then by unit. I'm going to shut off my group by bar, and I'm going to turn it on one more time so that we can take a look at another way that this data can be used. So let's go ahead and let's group by our service, and then we're going to group by our maintenance 4. And now what we see is we see our compressible, non-compressible, and steam valves. And if we go into our non-compressible or liquid valves, we'll see how many we're in for different kinds of maintenance. So if we applied a filter that was a date range, let's say all of the repairs from 2010 and 2011, we can now come in and take a look at some pretty detailed analysis behind our valves using this function in the group bar. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to toggle group bar back off, and that brings us back to our standard grid. One of the most common things you're going to do inside of VKViewer is generate reports. No sense in having all of this accurate data input if you can't print it out and get a test certificate or some other kind of report on your valves. So let's take a look at some of the way ValveKeep phrases them, full page reports. For that, I'm going to switch over to control valves, so up to my equipment type. I will click on the control valve icon, and I'm now in control valves. And again, as a brief refresher, we're taking a look at all repairs for the Training Livingston plant. So this is the working owner and plant that we're currently in. Over here on the left, you'll see that we have a reports button. If I go ahead and click it, of course, first I would have needed to have been on the valve that I'm interested in, or the event to the valve that I want to print the reports for. When I come over to my reports button and I click on it, you see my options. I can immediately generate a data sheet. I can go to all reports. I can print an image report, or I can print a grid report. Let's go quickly take a look at the image report. When I go into the image report command, I'm presented with a few options. The first thing I'm going to do is select the column headers that I would like to show up on my image report. So I'm going to select tag number, manufacturer, and date tested. Now that they're all selected, I'll take a look at my other options. Over here, I see I can generate an image report for all of the events in the grid, the event that I'm currently on, or selected entries. So if I wanted to select a number of valves I'm interested in reporting on, I can do that, and I can then press selected entries. The other options that I can select in my image report are, do I want the images for just the valve? Do I want the images for just the repairs to the valve? Would I like the file name of the image on the report? And do I want to include the comment? We'll take a look at these further in another demo, but for now we're just going to leave all of them checked the way they would be by default. The last thing we need to decide is how many images do we want on a page. Right now it is set up for 1 image per page. I'm going to set it up for 4 on a page, or having it done in quarters. Now that my options are set, I'll click generate. And VKViewer goes ahead and it generates the PDF that I need, and it sends it down to my local PC, and I will now open it. So there we go. There is the image report that we have generated for the valve event in question. I'll close the PDF. I'm going to close out of the image report, and we're going to take a look at some of the other kinds of reports that we can generate. Here we have the option to go into all the reports. So I'm going to go ahead and click all reports, and our list of reports available shows up. The most common kinds of reports we have are travelers, or shop sheets that follow the valve around during the repair, data sheets or test certificates, and then we have those two kinds of reports for new valves and for repaired valves. So you have a selection of the kinds of reports you want to generate, and obviously the data sheet button would have generated us the test report for a repair. If we scroll down the list of available reports, one of the ones I want to take a look at here is the complete valve summary. And what this allows you to do is print a history of all the events to a valve in a single report. So I'm going to go ahead and select complete valve summary, and here again in my options or my setup, we have the ability to generate this report for all of the valves in the grid, only the one that we're on, or all the selected entries that we have in our grid. I'm going to go ahead and leave it on the CV Demo 1. Click Generate to generate our complete valve summary report. It is generated and sent down to the local computer. I will open it up as a PDF, And now you see the complete valve summary report. So at the top, we have the static information about the valve and the way the valve is in the field today. And at the bottom, we have the entire history of the repairs to this valve. So this is a beautiful report that shows us a summary of what's happened to the valve over its life. I go ahead and close out of the PDF, and I will close out of the reports. And what we will do now is we will switch back over to relief valves. And I will leave it in all repairs, training Livingston. And we're going to take a look at a very useful function inside of VKViewer. We're going to tie together a number of the things we've seen in this demo to generate a specific report for ourselves. That report is going to be a report that we will use to show the repairs that have been done during 2011 and 2012, and we're going to summarize the information about the repair in a way that we can tell something important about our valves. The first thing that I'm going to do is select the working owner and plant that I want to do this report for. Up here, I'm currently in my owner of training. I'm going to change to all plants because I want this to be across all of my valves inside of the ValveKeep and VKViewer system. So now I'm looking at all of the valves. I'm now going to apply my date filter so that I can get my date range that I wanted. So I click on my date filter button. I'll come down here and I'll ask it to limit by date tested. And I want the date tested to be between January 2011, of course we'll pick the first of that, and today. Click apply, and VKViewer applies the filter for us. You'll notice that right now I have 104 events that fall in that date range. This is very important. If I come up and I take a look at the valves events that I'm looking at, you'll see I'm looking at all repairs. That means I'm looking at all the repairs from 2011 through today. If I drop down the selection and go to most recents, my 104 has changed to 100. What this means is that 4 valves have been in for repair since the beginning of 2011. So 4 valves have 2 repair events since 2011. The most recent events are always the way the valve is in the field. The historical events can be multiple, but they're not how the valve is in the field today. So it's always critical to be aware of what you're looking at. Know that most recent is the way the valve is today in your facility, and historicals is the way that the valves have been repaired over the life of the valve. And that's exactly what we want to look at. We want to look at all the repairs from 2011 through today. The report that we're interested in generating has some very specific columns. So let's go ahead and pick those columns first. I'll go to my columns command, and I'm going to remove the ones that I'm not interested in. And that is very easy, as you can see. All I need to do is click on it and remove the columns that I'm not interested in. And now I'm going to add in the columns that I do want. So over in the available columns, I will click in it, press the letter M to move to the M's, and I'm going to choose model number. I'm going to choose repair % complete. So I press the R's to move to the R's. I'm going to choose as found condition. Press the A, moves me to the A's. I can select as found condition. I'm going to choose a really important column, which is pretest as a percentage of the cold differential set. And this is a critical indicator to how your valve would have performed in the field. And the last thing that I'm going to choose is what happened during the pretest. So I've got all of the columns that I'm interested in, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slightly rearrange them. I want model number to be up by tag number, so I go ahead and I click on model number, and then I will move it up in the list. And now my report is going to contain tag number, model number, date tested, repair % complete, as found condition, the pretest as a % of cold diff, and what the result of the pretest was. I'm going to go ahead and click apply. And my grid changes to show me all of those columns. In the grid, what I can do is I can change the widths of the column, and I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to shrink the columns down. And the reason I'm shrinking down the column size is in VKViewer, when we print a line grid report, that line grid report is WYSIWYG. And in computing, WYSIWYG means what you see is what you get. So the widths of the column actually are going to translate on my report. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fit the grid as best as I think it can, and then I'm going to go ahead and generate the line grid report which will answer my question of, for all the valves tested since 2011, I want to see the pretest as a percent of cold diff, I want to see the results of the pretest, I want to see the as found condition, and I want to see the identifier for that valve. So this report will allow me to take a look at all of the valves tested and determines which ones are bad actors because they failed the pretest, and which ones passed the pretest and potentially can have their maintenance interval stretched out. This is a critical piece of information for me to make decisions with. Up to our reports command, and in the reports you'll notice I have a grid report. And what the grid report allows me to do is it allows me to basically print the spreadsheet that I've just built. So again, I've got some options that I can choose from. I can have all in grid or only my selected ones. If I wanted to, I can include the parts for each repair. I can give it a title and I can give it a subtitle. For my title, I'm going to say repairs since 2011. I can sum the columns, I can do a number of other things, but for now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to preview this report. And here's my report in preview mode. So you can see that I have my tag number, model, date tested, repair percent complete, as found condition, the pretest as a percent of cold diff, and what happened during the pretest. Very important information about it. We can see the flagging here of valves that pre-tested outside of the allowable range of their cold diff, and we can take a look at what the condition was it was found in. In this case it was guiding part damaged, and we know what valve it was. So we know that that valve should be taken a look at a little bit closer. Notice the widths of the columns. Remember in my grid I had changed the widths of the columns. Obviously I can go back to my grid and I can stretch out the columns and I can make this report a little bit prettier. At any rate, this report is one of the critical pieces of information I can generate using VKViewer. So I'm going to go ahead and close that report. Brings me back to my VKViewer. And at this point we're going to end this introductory demo into VKViewer. To end a session of VKViewer, I'll come up in the top right hand corner, I'll click log out, and it asks me if I'm leaving so soon. So there we go. That is the end of the introductory demo on VKViewer. Please talk to your channel partner or Dresser Direct office, or take a look at our website for other demo videos. There's also training videos showing some of the more advanced functions inside of the software. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you back soon.